55-year-old Chad Daybell likes to tell on himself. He has an interesting pattern to him, and as I say, people have patterns. Chad seems to enjoy his play on words and his clever hints, and finds humor and satisfaction in it. His trial is exposing a pattern, but there's a particular aspect that deserves a closer look, and it bothers me. And from my experience, that usually means there's more beneath the surface. I'm Linda with It's a Crime, so now let's get into it. In this entire case, Chad has found humor and enjoyment in his words. Everything from calling a mortuary the day Lori's fourth husband died, Charles Vallow, and casually asking for a ballpark figure on the price to ship Charles Vallow's remains, with the knowledge that a bat was involved in his demise.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm assisting them with their calls. How can I help you today?
We just had a death in the family, and we really don't want anything but a cremation and then to send the cremains to a family in Louisiana. Just a simple, nothing other than a cremation and sending him to his family for a service in Louisiana. So is there any way to know a ballpark price on that?
He even called himself Chad Daybell. Or in another instance, he told a friend that his wife, Tammy Daybell, died by choking to death.
At the memorial service for Tammy Daybell, did you have a conversation with Chad Daybell?
I did. During the visitation or the viewing part of it, I had a conversation with Chad specifically at that time.
Did he say anything to you, or did you discuss the way or reason that Tammy had passed away?
As I was going through the line, Chad and I have been very close. And when I got to him, he broke down crying. I broke down crying. We hugged each other, and he said something to the effect, she choked to death, and that's how she died. So
he had discrepancies in what he did say about her death with several people, among other things, but that was one of them. Chad also loved to tell stories, especially a cringy story about James and Elena, he and his mistress Lori Daybell's aliases. It was written like a riled up teenager. But today, it's a text message that I want to hone in on and talk about. In my last video, I went through Chad's cop car confession the day that JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan were found, Lori's children. I'll have that at the end of this video or in the description box below. As for this text, first I'll read the whole thing, then I'll break it down, and I'll give you a little more of a fuller timeline near the end of this video, but first, let's get to the text. Notable, this is a text written by Chad to his then wife, Tammy Daybell. He was at their property during this text, but Tammy would be at work. It says, "Well, I've had an interesting morning. I felt I should burn all the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He is now in our pet cemetery. Fun times." Now, when we look at this visually, I have certain terms highlighted in blue, which will show major aspects to the case. Now, the first line, "Well, I've had an interesting morning." This is actually noted as the first time Chad really had a long text to Tammy, as it was typically very short, so it tipped off the investigators. But on this particular morning, he's long-winded. He says, "I felt I should burn." Chad had a big bonfire that was caught on satellite the day Tylee was buried. It says next, "All of the limb debris by the fire pit. Tylee Ryan was dismembered and burned and buried near the fire pit." He says, "While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick." Now, a few things here. Chad describes Tylee as the big raccoon. Chad is all about physicality. According to a neighbor who testified, they said that the first thing Chad did to describe Lori was say that she was 5'6", 120 pounds, and fit.
Did you find it in any way unusual or not with respect to the fact that all this history of years of closeness with Chad that he hadn't told you before this, that he got married?
We hadn't had opportunity to talk, so this is the first opportunity to talk. I'm not surprised that that was what he would tell me.
How did you react to that when he said that?
I remember literally standing there and just not knowing what to say.
Did you eventually speak?
Yes, I did.
What did you say to him and ask him about?
I asked him the first thing that came to my mind, which is, who is she?
What did he say?
He told me her name was Lori Ryan.
Had you ever heard that name before?
I had not.
Did he tell you in that conversation when he had married Lori Ryan?
In that conversation, he did not. He just explained who she was.
Did he describe her in any way, tell you anything about her?
He did.
What kinds of things did he tell you?
He explained that she was 5'6", 120 pounds, blonde, worked out, physically fit, hairdresser, and just an amazing individual.
He wanted to also get in shape as well, and he said it was the Lily workout plan, which is another alias for Lori. And in trial, it was said that Tammy had gained weight, although according to everybody else, that was a lie. And we know Tylee had some weight on her, and here's Chad doing a little jab at her, in my opinion. Also, one of the detectives stated that raccoons are typically nocturnal, and there was no mention that I know of a raccoon being found in that yard. He goes on to say, I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. Now, even though Tylee did not have a cause of death, because she literally was reduced to charred remains in a bucket, there is something to Chad's telling text, and I believe he's doing another tell, in my opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if she was in fact shot. Now, notable during the trial, Zulema Pastenes, who was a friend of Chad's and the wife of Alex Cox, who was Lori's brother and protector, Zulema, or as the defense attorney John Pryor calls her, Zaluma, she recalled Alex Cox saying that if he ever turned into a zombie, to just shoot me in the face.
During that August visit, did you observe Chad and Alex together?
Yeah. They were talking to each other and they were acting as if they were, good friends.
Had you seen that type of interaction between the two of them before?
No.
And this is shortly after Charles' death?
Yes, this is right after Charles passed away.
And who was it that could discern light and dark if someone was light and dark?
Chad.
At some point, did you hear the term zombie?
Yes.
Do you recall who introduced that term or where you heard it?
I think the first time I ever heard it was at that lunch with Gib at Fireburst in February of 2019. But then the term kept coming up in regards to people being possessed.
Did Alex believe that there were zombies?
Oh, yeah.
Did Alex ever say anything to you about what he would want done if he became a zombie?
He told me, Sulema, if I ever turn into a zombie, just shoot me in the face.
And we know that Alex took part in Tylee's death/burial in some capacity. He was there that day on Chad's property. Now, Tylee was also called a zombie, and what do you do with zombies? You eliminate them. In trial, it was noted that when Tylee's burial site was located and they removed her remains, and under that melted bucket with her partial remains was Tylee's partial skull. So I'd like to know where's the rest of it. Comment below and let me know what you think. He goes on to say he is now in our pet cemetery, fun times. Now, everything in here was very carefully written. Now note, Chad did not have to write this to Tammy. He didn't have to write it in the way he did either. Yet, in Chad's mind, in my opinion, he felt he had to write it. Not to just cover up a reason for a bonfire or smoke or disturbance in the ground, but he had to say something to someone and get it out, to confess without confessing, and that's just what he did, in my opinion. Now, notable, he also takes ownership for all of it. I did this, I did that. He didn't say anybody else was with him, or he had a buddy here, or a neighbor that helped him with the raccoon. No, it was all him, and that is notable. Now, let me know your thoughts about that also below. So now if we look at my highlighted paragraph area again, there's a larger space where it's not highlighted, but I believe it should be. He's consistent in his tells, yet not there. There's a gap, but I think it's supposed to be. And this is the part where I find it very horrific. Now that we know more about Chad and his verbiage and his patterns and his tells, it makes it more compelling. The line, I felt I should burn all of the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. Now in the James and Elena story, Chad called his body part his storm. Gross, I know.
And then that next one, if you could indicate the date and time.
August 9th, 2019 at 9:39:54 p.m. in UTC -6 time.
And who did it appear to be being sent from, and to whom was it going?
From Chad to Lori.
And could you please read it into the record?
I completely agree. We were definitely in new territory in your bedroom.
And then the following message?
This one's
Date,
on,
sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. On August 10th, 2019 at 4:38:08 p.m. in UTC -6 time.
And who did it appear to be going from, and who was it being sent to?
From Chad to Lori.
And can you read it into the record?
Elena's magic hand has gripped the storm, and they stare into each other's eyes, barely able to breathe as intense waves wash over them.
And through the investigation, did you learn what storm was a name for?
It appeared to be a name for Chad's penis.
And in Zulema's testimony in trial, she said Chad told her that she and Lori were violently killed in one of their previous lives, that they had been the R word, which is another word for SA, I can't say it on here, and then they were killed and then dismembered.
When Chad had talked to you about some of your past lives, did he ever tell you how you died in past lives?
Yes, he told me that at one time I had come during the time that Jesus Christ was upon the earth, when he had come to the Americas, and that I had been killed with Lori at the same time, and that I had been killed in a very violent way, where I had been raped and killed, and my body had been dismembered.
When we go back and look at his wording now, he says, I felt I should burn all of the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. Now, we know there were limbs burned by the fire pit. We know what a coming storm is, according to Chad. And I guess we also know about it being soaked. He doesn't say he should burn the debris by the fire pit before it rained, does he? He wants to be clever, and yet he's disgusting. So what did he do to poor Tylee? Notable, here was the weather that week. Now, I feel more than ever confident about this statement and his duper delight, especially after hearing Zulema on the stand and her testimony about previous lives, dismemberment, and the R word. And I can't even fathom about what happened to Tylee, but at this point, nothing surprises me in so many ways in this case and with these people. And I think this is notable. I've said it before that Chad gets enjoyment out of the information. We have seen it in trial. I've been saying for 4 years that he talks in code over and over and over. We've seen his dupers in his preliminary. I also have a video, I'll put that below. And he enjoys the descriptions of it all, and we have seen his demeanor in trial. I believe he's telling on himself, and he did not have to word it the way he did, not have to call it limb debris and burning in the fire pit, and he did not have to say before it got too soaked by the coming storms. It's disgusting, and let me know what you think below. Now, let's talk about the timeline to bring it to a home run. On September 9th, in the early morning hours, Alex Cox is at Lori's apartment from 2:42 a.m. to 3:37 a.m. This is the only time in September when Alex was supposedly over at Lori's in the middle of the night, according to Lieutenant Ball. There's one full exact hour unaccounted for from 3:37 until 4:37 a.m. And then Alex is then at his apartment and stays there until 8:59 a.m. At which time Alex then leaves his apartment and heads to Chad's property. He arrives at 9:21 a.m. behind Chad's house near the east end of the barn. Now, Tammy Daybell would be at work at this time. And note, this was a Monday. JJ Vallow, Tylee's younger brother, dies 2 weeks later, also on a Monday. Alex stays on Chad's property from 9:21 a.m. until 11:39. Then he leaves and heads to Del Taco, where he stays for 10 minutes and leaves at 12:02 p.m. and then stays in his apartment for the rest of the day. 1 minute after Alex arrives at Del Taco at 11:53 a.m., Chad texts Tammy the raccoon text. He then says he's going to write at BYU, and as we know, Chad had been meeting up with Lori, his mistress, at BYU, and Tammy responds and says, "Good for you," but doesn't do that for quite some time later. And Chad then says he's back at home, and the children are found then 9 months later buried in Chad Daybell's yard. There was no raccoon, but 2 children who were brutally killed and buried in shallow graves, and Tylee dismembered and burned, and JJ wrapped in plastic and duct taped. Lori said JJ was at a Frozen 2 movie in November of 2019 during a child welfare check, and it was 2 months after the children were killed. 2 kids who were frozen underground in November at that time where Lori said it, in Chad Daybell's yard. There are more coded messages. We recently heard a coded phone call a day before the children were found in the yard, and the call took place on June 8th, 2020. Check this video out here for Chad's cop car confession, and check out the playlist here for more videos on the case. Stay tuned for the coded call. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.